Hi, Eric here with 30 by 40 Design Workshop. Today I want to continue on the video series that I'm doing looking at a small project that it's in my studio right now. I'm working on a barn studio for a client. It's an outbuilding, pretty simple outbuilding. The client directive was for multi-purpose studio space they could use for art projects for their kids, gathering space for friends, multi-purpose workshop. It had to have a kitchen, it had to have a bath, serve as sort of a bath space for and changing space for a nearby pool. So it had to serve a lot of different functions. They wanted to use it for hosting parties, and it had to be sort of industrial in its aesthetic, simple. It's in a developed neighborhood. They're fairly large lots, but this had to have a fairly stripped down design aesthetic. It's a fairly traditional neighborhood. They're looking for a sort of barn. The inside was meant to be completely stripped down, modern, clean, and minimalist. And the first stage of the design process, we set about designing the floor plan, and you can look back at the previous video for some of the details on that. And essentially we've settled on a floor plan that they're pretty happy with. There's some minor plan tweaks that have happened. We flipped it end for end. And this is part of the normal process, the back and forth process, working with the client, giving them some information, they react to it, we go ahead and revise the floor plans. The next step from that, and even when we're initially designing the floor plan, we have some sense for what the building looks like. We knew it wanted to be a simple shape. We also wanted to have some suggestion of the more modern interior on the exterior. And we've developed this sort of flat roof canopy as a way of expressing some of the more modern tendencies of the inside on the exterior shell of the building. We can't be too overt about it because there are bylaws that exist in this subdivision that prevent us from using flat roofs as a major gesture on the exterior. One of the things that we do once we have the floor plan set, we know where, in general, where the spaces are, what their relationship is to the landscape and the sun patterns. So this is the northern side of the building, this is the southern side, and we know how the sun is moving. We know generally how the client wants to use the site. Once we know those factors, then we can really start figuring out what the exterior of the building is going to look like. And when we design the elevations, which is what you're looking at here, we really start thinking about what the openings are. And in order to do that, we think about what spaces they're serving. Now, the big gesture in this floor plan is obviously the studio. It makes up the bulk of the floor plan, and it has a very public relationship both to the entry area of their house and to the site, and linking the interior of the studio to the exterior of the space. So obviously that's where our big gesture wants to be. And there are a couple of things that we need to consider here. Obviously we have to be thinking carefully about the budget. Every project has a budget, and when we talk about big openings, and if I can just sketch this big opening here for you, this is about a 50-foot building, just to give you some idea, and the eave height, which is this point here, is about 10 feet. Okay, you can see our little scale person here. That 10-foot spot sits in the, so that eave height sets the height of the building in general, the proportions of the building. You can see this big opening here, if we just sort of color that in. That's very barn-like, and that's part of what we're working with here. This is the design aesthetic that we're working with. Now, when we think about those big openings, everyone always wants to be able to open this space wide up. When we're designing these big industrial type spaces, it's a studio space, you want to be able to move your tables and chairs and have a clean flow between interior and exterior of the space. The problem with that is these size doors, if this is a 12-foot opening, from here to here, that's a 24-foot overall opening. That's a large door, and if you figure a lift slide door, which could accommodate that opening, is about $1,000 per lineal foot, that's about $24,000 worth of doors in this one wall alone. So we have to think about how can we make this and feel open, feel like it's connected to the landscape, but not spend $24,000 doing it. And so that's the challenge with this sort of main elevation. The other challenge is we have to be able to provide a place for the sort of quintessential sliding barn door, and that's what these panels are here. Creating this flat roof canopy that links around the corner here gives us a place to do that. It sort of integrates we can conceal the track, the barn door sliding track, in this sort of soffit piece. And then as we wrap around the corner, it also then acts as an entryway, a way to mark the main entry, the side entry to this structure. Creates a little sort of porch space to keep the rain out. And we like doing that as architects. We like to sort of create spaces that make sense to people on the outside. So when you're designing your elevations, that's one of the primary considerations. How does the building relate to the site, and how does it make sense for the users sort of accessing it? And you can see in this configuration we've gone with 2 smaller windows on the gable ends, 1 on each gable end, and that's very barn-like, to have a lot of wall and a small opening, or a large opening in a wall. On the north face here, you can see we're sort of working with the language of clerestory windows. There's a neighboring property over here. There's some grade issues that we have to deal with, so we've created this retaining wall, this dry laid retaining wall. But we also need access between the cooking area, the kitchenette area here, and the grill area out here, wherever that finally ends up. So there is still some access on this. In general, what we favor on the north side, and especially when there's some privacy issues, is locating a clerestory window bank up high. Clerestories allow light to enter deeper into the space because the window is higher on the wall. So you can see if we locate a window up here, sunlight coming in actually reaches further into the space. And then if you're an inhabitant in the space looking out, it prevents views, allows light while preventing screening views. So clerestory windows are a great vehicle for doing that. And in general, we settled on we presented the client with 5 different options. I'm showing you 2 here because I think these are the 2 strongest ones. The large sliding doors that we talked about in the beginning of the video, in this particular configuration, we've opted for a sort of French slider where the middle 2 panels slide to the side, and the overall opening is 12 feet. When you open the 2 sliders, you're left with roughly 6 feet, so half of that opening. So you have a large 6-foot opening here and a large 6-foot opening here. Now that's not quite a barn feel, so we wanted to explore what it would take to get more barn, a much larger opening there. And this option looks at doing that. We went to a different door manufacturer. These are actually sort of commercial door frames. They're adapted for residential use, but essentially the frame comes knocked down. They call it KD. The frame is assembled in the field. The sashes are shipped fully glazed, and you pop the sashes into the frame that you assemble on site. Saves some money. It's more of a commercial system, and thus we can get larger openings. Now in this particular one, you can see this line indicates that this entire 6-foot side and this entire 6-foot side of this opening are stationed in the center so that they'll both slide to the side here. That leaves us with a full 12-foot wide opening, the perception of a 12-foot wide opening. Of course, we have some structure in the middle of that, but to us, this is a much more barn-like feel. Opening the center of this space up really allows you to sort of move more freely in and out of this space. And then we started looking at what some of the other, we have a mechanical space here, a bath space. The bath is in general a private space. It's again sitting on the north side. It made sense to locate a clerestory window up high in that space. And we actually tucked one around the corner here as well. And we'll sort of solicit the client's feedback and figure out what they want to do about that. The last thing to mention in this particular scheme is this solid door that leads out to a cooking area out here, and you can see the grill. We've got different options for where this door could be in this wall. Does the grill fall here? Does it fall here? It should be related to that door. When we put the door sort of more in the center of the plan, it allows a stronger relationship to the interior kitchenette, a more direct access to the grill area, and it just kind of made sense. In this case, it's solid. That way, this whole north face is a more solid piece. The south face is completely open, and yet on the north face, we actually still allow some light in up from above. This face has no windows in it in this particular scheme. We had the previous one, you remember, has a small window. This faces the street side. We really wanted to go with a real austere face, looks like a sort of shed piece, and then as you arrive to the site and come in, you actually sense that, oh wow, this is a, this is a fairly large open studio space. The sliding panels is the last thing I'll mention here. They stack to completely conceal this. So you end up with, when the building's not in use, you end up with a sort of screened face. And depending on how we design and build these panels, they can actually be sort of slats so that they will provide some sort of screen. If we put a space between these boards, they can provide a sunscreen on the south face and modulate the amount of light that comes into this space, as well as sort of make it look like it's a completely closed building when they're totally closed. So that's the evolution of this piece. The one last thing that I want to mention is a proportional game that we played, and it's a dialogue we're continuing to have with the client. One of the things they requested was they didn't like the idea of having a 7-foot door. They felt like it sort of felt cheap, sort of lower quality for their home. And their main house has all 8-foot doors. And here's where I sort of fell on that. Remember we mentioned this is the 10-foot eave line. This is the 0-foot, the lower level plan line. I recommended against that for this reason. These doors here are shown at 7 feet, okay? And these are our big monumental sliders that move out of the way to create that real barn-like feeling. When it's 7 feet, okay, the top of that is 7 feet, notice the amount of wall that we have above it. We still have 3 feet of wall above it. Now this tricks the eye into thinking the structure is actually taller and larger than it really is. If we were to move this point closer to the eave, and I'll just kind of briefly sketch that out. We have our 10-foot eave here. This is our roof plane. If we were to stretch these doors up such that they were closer to the eave line, let's say 8, 8.5, 9 feet even, not only is this a strange proportion for this sliding door configuration, they just got a lot more expensive as well, but it actually makes the structure feel squatter. It doesn't make it feel taller. And inside will be the same perception. As long as this point is above your eye level and you sense some height of wall above that, it will fool your mind into thinking this space is actually a lot taller than it really is. The closer this line comes to the eave line, the lower it will actually appear. And so we've done a couple of things here. We've saved quite a bit of money by using just a standard 7-foot tall frame here rather than an 8-foot or taller frame. We've also created a more barn-like sort of proportion in this wall, and it just feels better. The ratio of solid to void feels better to me, and we'll see what the client thinks. I think they will agree. Now the next level of decision here comes into figuring out how we're going to clad this, and have some ideas about that. The next video will go into how we go about selecting materials, because that's the second layer of designing the exterior elevations. All right? Thanks for watching.